ended up choosing or thinking that Bauer would, and that Harris Publications and Spin Media, which both run Double XL and Vibe respectively, I concluded that I don't think they will, and I'll go on to explain that in the next slide. So my main reasoning was that with Spin and Harris Productions distributing the two most famous magazines of this type, Double XL and Vibe, I don't believe that they would require a magazine to compete with the successes of these two famous publications. Just Double XL, really, really well-known name in the hip-hop scene, so is Vibe, and it doesn't really make sense from a financial point of view or from any really, and just from any really, anybody with any sense really. It doesn't really make logical sense to want another magazine of the same type to compete with a magazine they already have that's largely successful. So I ultimately decided that I thought Bauer would be the institution to distribute my culprit. I said this because they have a proven positive relationship with media products, music media products specifically. Culprit would offer this institution a magazine of a genre they currently do not offer to consumers, and consequently they could really capitalize on the target audience that they have previously not really tapped into or appealed to. So above you can see Double XL readership figures that I found. These show that not only the male, 78% male audience, but most notably it shows that 67% of their readers are of African American origin. And I think some people may find this really surprising because only about 10 to 14% of America is actually African American. So the fact that Double XL still manages to outsell even Rolling Stone based on readership figures is really, really quite impressive, and it shows that the kind of target audience that I'll be appealing to would be of real financial interest to Bauer. Bauer have really showed that they can handle music products well. They've got TV shows such as 4Music and The Box, to music magazines such as Q and Kerrang, and I mean, 4Music and The Box, for example, are household names. Everybody knows what they do, and the fact that they can run these shows and magazines so successfully makes me think that they'd handle corporate very, very well. Who would be the audience for your media product? So, as mentioned before, corporate's appealing primarily to those of an age between 16 and 24, as these are the most actively involved people in hip-hop as a genre. In terms of gender, corporate would be appealing mostly to males, principally because men are much more actively involved in the genre, and that's shown statistically. Again, comparing my product with the successful Double XL magazine, figures released in July 2008 showed how 78% of the readers were males. I do, however, believe that hip-hop is evolving. A genre that was once, and is still today, viewed by some people as intensely misogynistic, is seeing female rappers, and rapping in general for females becoming much more popular year by year. Artists like Iggy Azalea, Nicki Minaj, and Azealia Banks, just a few names, changing the general perception of the genre. And consequently, I made sure that I didn't alienate any potential female audience, because this is evidently a growing figure with the development of the genre. This same Double XL survey in 2008 July, it showed how the majority of readers earned was roughly £33,000 in British sterling, and in our money, this shows how corporate would appeal mainly to those of a C1 and C. Also shows how corporate would appeal to an E NRS classification, those of an E classification, particularly students, because obviously, as we know, students are really, really into hip-hop in general. With regard to psychographics, corporate's target audience is mostly the aspirers. I explain this in more detail and how my magazine appeals to them on the following question, but just in general, it's more the idea that a lot of the content is aimed towards people that are aspiring to have a career in question 5 is, how did you attract and address your audience? So, unlike Double XL, I decided not to incorporate any sections of my magazine that would showcase attractive women. As I mentioned before, although 78% of the readers of Double XL would be it'd be a realistic figure that I would probably be receiving, but taking in regard the evolution of the genre and the introduction and the growing number of females being involved in it, I would have to say that it wouldn't really be appropriate to do this. So the aspirers classification, those are the aspirers classification, are orientated to appearance, persona, and fashion, all of which are showcased to a great extent in corporate. Just through, for example, here, the models, his clothing is appealing to those of the aspirers classification. The language that's incorporated in both the front cover and the double page spread, and the contents page even, is it relates a lot to the kind of reader who would be buying the magazine. Although it is really coherent and it is formal to an extent, but it doesn't alienate at all the type of reader that would want to read it and feel some kind of connection to the magazine, rather than it be kind of seem like a foreign language. I wanted to involve that kind of feeling of corporate being something that the reader can relate to a lot. So, for example, here, this is the final paragraph of the interview. The expletive language is like it relates a lot, and although it's quite rare in my magazine, it's used appropriately, and that's what I really wanted to incorporate in this magazine to get the best product possible. The minimalistic design of the double page spread is clear and it's powerful, and here we see the masthead of the front cover is big and bold. We see this in both Vibe and corporate, and it's a really, really effective thing to do and technique to use in order to, appeal to the target audience. Question 6 is, what have you learned about technologies from the process of constructing this product? So, I use Photoshop for my front cover. Something I hadn't really used in great detail before I started this project. I used it a bit at home, but not really enough to understand the full power of the program on the whole. Just so many different things that you can do with the program, but we learned in early lessons how to use a spot healing tool, and I actually used this for mine to clear imperfections. And just small things, from things like airbrushing that's seen in real media. So, used a lot. I didn't really want to incorporate it, but I did still use a spot healing tool just for a basic kind of professional to make most of that magazine. So in design, I used only for the double page spread. I thought it was much more beneficial for doing this, because it was easy to separate the columns and make sure everything was perfectly aligned to achieve the best and most professional design possible. I did initially try in Photoshop. I found it quite tricky, even including the big pull quote. I just think InDesign was a lot better and suited for this. Publishers use it a lot more for that kind of thing. It's a big amount of text that I typed up for the interview, and although the editing features are not as impressive as on Photoshop, I did really think that it gave a much more professional look than I could have achieved on Photoshop, and I could do this in a much quicker time and achieve the desired effect, really. Moving around text boxes was really a pain. It was really quite difficult, much more difficult than on Photoshop, and I did encounter several problems trying to adjust it at the end. That was my only issue with InDesign, but on the whole, I found it a really nice experience, and I think that if you put the work in, you can really achieve the best result possible. preliminary task, what do you feel you've learned in the progression from it to the full product? So this is a front cover comparison. Just from anybody's perspective, really, who doesn't really know about the magazine or magazines in general, music magazines, you don't need to know too much to understand that the latter photo on the right is a lot better than the one on the left in every single regard. I really did learn a lot from the preliminary task. I would say that the first and most obvious thing is that the text in mine appears behind. I use Photoshop to do that, and I really like that effect. It just doesn't. It look for me. It looks fairly amateur. Um, for example, I really enjoyed making my barcode. I made it really professional. Put a lot of detail into that, and you can see that on my blog, my planning blog, that section. But I just think, in general, just from anybody's point of view and perspective, really, I learned a lot from the preliminary task. But anybody can notice that the magazine isn't anywhere near the quality of the second. The pose, for example, in the second is just you can tell that there's a greater deal of planning going on. The first one, it doesn't really, like the reader isn't drawn to any specific part of the image. The background in the second one that I did makes the subject of the magazine stand out a lot more than the first. And you know, it's supposed to be a school magazine in a library, but I think it could have been done a lot better. Maybe it could have been a white wall with him holding a book, or just less going on, so that the subject of it became more visible. And I think I kind of disregarded that when I started it. Not purposely, but I just didn't really understand the amount of planning that really needed to go into producing a really professional looking product. And now I do. Even the cover lines, they're kind of floating. They're not equal. Like in the second one, they're seen equal, and just the color schemes are a bit random. It's like a half-hearted effect of attempt at using the effects on Photoshop with where it says Kane Lincoln. You can't really see in the text, even though there's a stroke on the text, and you can see the black outline. You can't really make it out from a long distance away. I just don't think. I mean, if it was to be printed, no one would really think that it's a professional magazine. The barcode, there's no date there. But I really did learn a lot. I mean, I took this photo on an iPhone, whereas the second one was taken on a really professional, nice Canon. And I learned a lot. It's really evident. The contents page, the same thing. I just think, in general, the one on the left is a result of poor planning. I had to use the same photo zoomed in, and I actually added an Instagram filter on it, because I just really didn't have a grasp of how a good professional contents page would really be created. So it did take a great deal of research and learning from the preliminary task to achieve the effect of the second one. The editor's note on the first one it looks really bad. It's one column in comparison to the second photo, my final product, which is split into two columns for the editorial. It's got a signature. It looks really professional and sleek. And I just think even the features page on the first one is nothing like the one on the second. It just looks a lot more professional to the average person's point of view. And it's a selection of images. I talked about that earlier, about how Vibe incorporates one image rather than two or three, or even more. But I think at least with the Vibe one, it's one image that takes up the whole page, and you would never really see it on a magazine, just an image. I mean, it looks more like a biography profile or something rather than a content page of a magazine. And I mean, it's just really not good enough for a professional magazine. But I did learn a lot from it. I mean,